everybody. Welcome to another edition of Men in Stripes, brought to you by StripeHype.com, a fan-sided exclusive network there. Tim Daniel, excited for another excellent week where we're going to give our fantasy football previews for the season. And who better do that with me than our co-host of Men in Stripes and the co-editor of StripeHype.com, none other than Matthew Willson.
How are you, Tim?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
So, we kind of had a little bit of a slow week, which isn't terrible in Bengals world.
Right.
But we're in between mini camps and training camp. So, what better than to have some fantasy football fun, especially as people are starting to get revved up for their fantasy leagues.
Fantasy, football, fantasy. You remember that Peyton Manning and Eli Manning commercial? Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, after they did a football on your phone, that was a classic.
I think one of my favorite commercials, fantasy football-wise, was, I'm trying to remember the players that were involved. And it was like the one guy was celebrating because a player got him, like, so many points, and his teammate came up and goes, "Am I on your fantasy team?"
There's that one, like, yeah.
Computer. I forget who that was.
And then there was that one, it was like for NFL.com, I don't know if you remember that years ago. And it's like Adam Vinatieri setting his lineup, but they don't reveal it's him till the end. And like Peyton Manning's like, here on NFL.com fantasy football, you can realize like, I'm not starting today. And they show Keyshawn Johnson check his phone. He's like, I got cut? And it's just like, Adam Vinatieri's like, all kickers.
Oh. But yeah, so, well, the other thing we're going to also do, we're still going to continue on with our lovely way too early preview. In fact, let's get started with our way too early preview right before we break into our fantasy special.
That sounds good to me. So as we go through the schedule and go through each opponent, we are now, I made this mistake last week and said we were going to do the Patriots, but I was 2 weeks early on that. We're at the Miami Dolphins. So the important things about this game to remember: 1, the return of Von Tess from his suspension; 2, Thursday Night Football in prime time; 3, the rumor right now is the Bengals are going to wear black and white uniforms; 4, we have no idea what the heck to expect from the Miami Dolphins. They are an interesting team, to put it the least. They have a lot of young talent. They have a lot of guys who have been consistently inconsistent, I guess might be the word to say there. Talking about guys like Ryan Tannehill, who, yeah, I can say it's fair to say he's their franchise quarterback. They've obviously put the stock in him. He definitely has the athletic ability, but has had a little bit of an up-and-down career. Out goes Lamar Miller. Jay Ajayi comes in, getting his shot to be the feature back. So he's a guy a lot of people are excited about. We have seen the things Jarvis Landry can do. Devontae Parker, when he finally got to play at the end of the year, started really showing up, the rookie from Louisville, who I compared to Josh Gordon when he came out of the draft as far as talent level. Defensively, they have a lot of interesting players there. Brent Grimes is gone, which I'm sure a lot of people are happy about that, so they don't have to hear from his wife anymore. And Ndamukong Suh's still there. Olivier Vernon, I believe, has left. Am I right there? Yeah, I think he did leave. I'll look at that here in a second. But, yeah, so Dolphins are an interesting team. They're in the AFC East. They haven't had a lot of success in a long time. It's been a long time since they made the playoffs. They've been close, but this is a team where I think of the biggest mysteries of if they're going to be good or bad going into the season as far as Bengal opponents. They got to be up top that list.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that I think that they'll have to face against. I mean, they obviously have Jordan Cameron down there. The Bengals know Jordan Cameron from the Cleveland Browns. Tight end there is he? What's that?
I forgot about him playing there.
So the Bengals are going to be very familiar. He's a good weapon for Tannehill, but at the same time, both Cameron and the Bengals are very familiar with each other. So I think that's kind of a nice little bust out there in terms of like just even keel, kind of cancel each other out there. The other thing that I'm kind of intrigued about, and I mean he's 25 years old, so he's still young, but Kiko Alonso was supposed to be a big part of that defense in that linebacker core. Of course, in his fourth year. And so it's going to be interesting to see how he does this season coming in. Of course, as you said, they still have some big names to them.
Rashad Jones is another one. I forgot about him.
Yeah, of course, as you said, Ndamukong Suh. Another person that's there, young kid still. If I remember correctly, he was on the Saints last year, Kenny Stills.
Oh, yeah.
Kenny Stills is now in Miami, and Kenny Stills is another player that, again, I mean, you're going to see really kind of be a target for Tannehill. So they got some offensive weapons there, and of course, who better? And this is going to be an interesting thing to see if he matches up against Tyler Boyd. But Lafayette Pitts from Pittsburgh is a rookie this year. He's a corner. So of course, Tyler Boyd played on the offensive side for Pitt. Now you got Lafayette Pitts on the defensive side for Miami. It's going to be interesting to see if they allow him to match up against Tyler Boyd, since they kind of know each other's tendencies. That could work kind of both ways. It could work in the favor of Tyler Boyd, because if he knows Pitts bites a little more on certain moves, he can more be proactive there. But it also works for Pitts because Pitts knows kind of the strengths and the weaknesses of Tyler Boyd, so if he can expose that. So it's going to be interesting to see there, too, how that would work out and how that would kind of see if that would cancel each other out, or if that would be something that essentially could be a matchup to watch.
Yeah, there's the other interesting thing about this, just the way the Bengals schedule breaks down this year. It's only the second home game of the season. They're starting the first 2 weeks are on the road. The next 2 weeks are home. And then they're on the road again for 2 weeks. And then they trade home and away games throughout the rest of the year or something like that, I'm pretty sure. It's pretty close. So, yeah, that's one of the things we'll look at there. So I think that's going to play a factor. Like I said, Vontaze Burfict's back in this game. It's his first game of the year, so we know he's going to have fresh legs. And we know he's going to be ready to go. So that's going to be exciting there. I'm excited to see what this young Miami Dolphins talent can do. I love Devontae Parker. I cannot wait to see what he develops into as an NFL football player. I think he has all the skill to do it. Another U of L guy that a lot of people didn't really talk about there, but was a first-round pick. We've seen Jarvis Landry do big things since he's been in the league. We saw him do big things at LSU on the opposite side of Odell Beckham. Also on that same team as Jeremy Hill, so he's another exciting guy there too. Jay Ajayi is a guy a lot have been talking about as far as a breakout star. A lot of people really expect a lot from him. Didn't do much his rookie year, but he's big things are expected from him for sure. So this is a very, very interesting team. Like I said, just because we don't know what we're going to get from them. But I did confirm Olivier Vernon did in fact leave. Took an $85 million contract to go to the Giants. So I'm sure we'll be talking about him when we break down the Giants in a couple weeks. So, yeah, they're an interesting team, like I keep saying. A new coach in there, a new system, a lot of young talent. So I expect the Dolphins to probably be in that 6 to 8 win group. But I think this is the one I can say is fair to chalk up a W for the Bengals. Obviously, right now, before we have about 3 months before this game, it's not saying much. But when you look at the schedule on paper, that's got to be the one you think they pull off the W.
Yeah, I mean, that's again, it's at home, so it's at Paul Brown Stadium. So I think that's an immediate advantage, Bengals. I said I think these teams match up fairly well. Geno Atkins, I know we're not in Miami, but please don't get hurt. Because of course the Halloween game back a couple years. Oh my God! Yeah. Against Miami is when Geno Atkins tore his ACL, and
that was the game when Giovanni Bernard had that one touchdown where he do you remember that? He was on the other end of the field, came around, ran back 10 yards, and then turned up and flipped into the end zone and hurt his ribs.
Well, it was also the game where they came back from like a 17-3 deficit to tie it up, and the
Safety.
Bengals. What's that?
They lost on a safety.
Yeah, did they lose? Yeah, they did lose on a safety. But I still remember, too, in order to save the game, because Mike Wallace was streaking down the field. I believe it was... Actually, I think it was Jones. What was it?
Yeah, it was Adam Jones. He forced the fumble.
Well, no. This is when Mike Wallace was streaking down the field. He was wide open. Adam Jones barely got his shoelaces to get a pass interference call to save it from a touchdown, and they ended up, I believe, missing the field goal.
That's right, yeah.
And so it ended up being one of the best defensive plays of that year, even though it was a penalty, because he ultimately saved a guaranteed touchdown because of Mike Wallace streaking and being just wide open.
He's so football intelligent. Unbelievable.
So, it's weird how I remember that game, but I remember just standing yelling at my TV that game. And, of course, Mike Wallace sticks out because, of course, the former Steeler, and we all hate Steelers.
And now he's a Raven.
Now he's a Raven, yep, that's right. So, he can't figure out where to find a home. So, should we quickly reset before we get into our fantasy special?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that here. We are Men in Stripes, brought to you by StripePipe.com, a fan-sided exclusive. This is fantasy football time. I think we should do a mock draft right before the season, right before everything gets going. We should get some of the other guys to join us for that. That'd be cool. Yeah, we got to make that happen. Do like 4 rounds or something.
Could definitely do a couple for sure.
Yeah. And then, so with this, we're just kind of breaking down. For those who follow the site, know that I have been working heavily on doing the Bengals individual players fantasy football previews. I've done 5 now. I've touched on Dalton, McCarron, Bernard, Hill. Just finished up A.J. Green, so I'm about to attack all the wide receiver group and move through there. So we're going to kind of break down what we expect from our players, where we would draft them, where they rate amongst other players in their position, and just kind of do our quick touch on that. So where do we start there? I think the big start there is probably you got to start at the helm. Andy Dalton getting a very interesting grouping if you look at the rankings, whether it be NFL.com or ESPN.com. Some people have him as the top 10 fantasy quarterback as a QB1. Some people have him as a QB2. I think ESPN would see Matthew Berry had him at 17, so he had him as a mid-tier quarterback 2. And then Mike Clay had him as number 9 overall, so he had him as a QB1 in a 10 to 12 team league. Right underneath Carson Palmer, actually, on that, if I remember correctly. So, we know what Dalton's going to bring to the table. I feel like I'm referencing my article when I say we know he's going to get you yardage. He is one of the most intelligent quarterbacks I've ever seen. He throws touchdown passes. He runs for touchdown passes. If you are like me and you're lucky and you had him in that Titans game a couple of years ago, you got a receiving touchdown from Andy Dalton in that game. And if you're in PPR, full point PPR league, you got additional point for that. That was awesome. So, the athleticism's there. I'm still blown away that people think Tyrod Taylor and Ryan Tannehill are rated higher than Andy Dalton in some places, and Kirk Cousins rated higher than Andy Dalton. But I feel like he doesn't get the respect, as Birdman would say, that he deserves.
No, Andy Dalton really doesn't. And, of course, I'm looking. I play Yahoo, so I'm trying to look even through Yahoo to see where A.J. Green even falls there, and I may actually have to do a search because he is yet to pop up on my screen even in the top 100. Oh, nope, there he is. He's number 90.
A.J. Green?
No, I'm sorry, Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton is number 90 on Yahoo Sports for player ranking behind Tom Brady, Eli Manning, who will throw more interceptions than touchdowns, Tony Romo, Blake Bortles, Carson Palmer, I mean, these are all guys that, no offense, I think outside of Tom Brady, because Tom Brady finds a way to do everything, I don't know. But he's a guy that is better than, with the exception of Carson Palmer, who's he's probably on equal level with, he's better than all those guys that I mentioned beforehand.
Yeah.
Blake Bortles, Tony Romo, because Tony Romo can't stay healthy, nor can his receivers. Eli Manning, who throws more interceptions than touchdowns, and he's ranked below them. I mean, there's some disrespect there.
Disrespect.
I mean, there's some disrespect there for sure. And so, Andy Dalton's much better than that. Andy Dalton, to me, is a top 10. I think he is a low quarterback one.
Yes.
I think he's one of those, if you are a PPR league especially, I'm going after receiver first, and I'm actually probably going after my top 2 receivers first before I focus on, and then I go after maybe a running back who might be more of a passing back, a.k.a. Giovanni Bernard, and then I'm going quarterback. So, I mean, he's one of those that especially in a PPR league, I'm going after probably in the 3rd to 4th round, depending on how it really is falling at that point within the draft. And so, Andy Dalton to me is a QB1, low QB1, but a QB1 nonetheless. I think if you are a non-PPR league where the quarterback plays a little bit more important role than a running back because of that, I'm probably drafting somebody like, hopefully drafting somebody like your Carson Palmer. Mm-hmm. I'm probably drafting your Andrew Luck. I hate saying it because I hate the man, but Ben Roethlisberger. Right. And of course Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, for sure.
Those guys I'm definitely taking before Andy Dalton. However, Andy Dalton's a great option, especially a PPR league.
I think, my one of my favorite tips I try to do every year is whoever I get at wide receiver, which I keep A.J. Green in my main league every year, and then I'll obviously try to draft additional guys. We play 3 wide out in our league, so we're a little different than most leagues. Mm-hmm. I try to do pairing with quarterback wide receiver tandem. So if I'm not going to get Dalton, I'll try to go get a quarterback to line up with another wide receiver I had, just to get those double touchdown points, because we all love those double touchdown points. So that's a big thing for me. I think last year I had Dalton, Eifert, and Green. And so I got a lot of touchdown points from that circumstance. So that's definitely something I look at there. So that's definitely an advice too, especially like Matthew said, in a PPR league. That's going to elevate Andy Dalton's statistics just for having guys like Green and Eifert and sure-handed players like Boyd, and also having weapons out of the backfield like a Gio Bernard. So that's definitely going to ensure Dalton there for sure. One of the articles I wrote, I touched on A.J. McCarron. We don't have really touched too much on him, obviously, as a backup. Though NFL.com, they say he was the most reliable backup quarterback in the NFL. But Dynasty League, are you handcuffing Dalton? If you have like 20, I've seen those leagues where they have like 20 total spots, where it's like 8 or 9 bench players. Is that a circumstance where you put A.J. McCarron at the end of your bench just in case something happens to Dalton?
I'm probably not putting him on the end of my bench. I definitely am putting a some leagues call it a flag, some leagues call it a watch list. Yep. I'm putting him on there because the second, say Andy Dalton gets injured, I'm jumping up and I'm grabbing A.J. McCarron very quickly and positioning myself hopefully to gain A.J. McCarron very quickly. Of course, depending on where you're sitting waiver wire list-wise, things like that are going to play a factor. But at the same time, if you are a deep league where you have, say 7 or 8 bench players, which I know most leagues anymore aren't, they're about a 5, maybe 6, and they'll have an IR list position open. But if I'm a deep league that I have 7 to 8 bench spots, I might take him to put him kind of on the back burner so I have him. But at the same time, I'm not holding my breath. If I'm a short bench, I'm going after more important players, and I'm putting them on a watch list.
Yeah, I think that's fair too. So let's move real quick here. Let's go to running backs here. Talk about Jeremy Hill. I think when you talk about fantasy football players, like as far as like talent to have on your roster, I don't think there's more that are interesting than Jeremy Hill, and it's the exact reason we've been talking about, as far as like the revitalization for year 3 for him since we started doing the show. Last year was definitely a disappointment, especially if you're like me, where you had the 10th pick in your draft and all the other big time running backs were taken that also disappointed. And you took Hill because you thought, man, what a rookie year he had. No way that he'll digress. Well, fumbles happened. Not hitting the hole happened. Only having about 770 yards. But still had 11 touchdowns, including a 3-touchdown game against Kansas City where he had 9 carries for 40 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Then you probably had him on your bench.
No, I started him that game, actually, because I was... What? Yeah, I know. On a fly. Yeah, on a fly, too. He's an interesting target there. One, obviously, we'll touch on Bernard here in a second. It's splitting carries with Gio. But Gio had a lot more snaps than Jeremy Hill did, obviously, down the stretch. Jeremy Hill is a guy that, does score a lot of touchdowns, but, as we've said many times before, has issues holding on to the ball. To kind of, reference the list I've been using to kind of touch on this, Matthew Barrett currently has Hill as a 19th rated running back, so has him, that's about RB2 range, which I think is definitely fair, just because of the up and down play.
No, I absolutely am right there with it. I think that's a fair assessment. It's an interesting situation to have. Jeremy Hill is number 48 overall on Yahoo's list. Giovanni Bernard is number 83. But then again, as I said before, this is going to go back to if you are a PPR league. Mm-hmm. If you're a PPR league, I'm putting Hill behind Giovanni Bernard.
I am too.
And so, one of the big things there, and I have Giovanni Bernard as a number 2 running back, just because, number 1, I'm facing the fact that, of course, the hands and reliability of Giovanni Bernard at this moment is better than Jeremy Hill. But number 2, yeah, Jeremy Hill's going to get the touchdowns. Jeremy Hill is your ground and pound guy, at least when you get into the red zone. However, Giovanni Bernard is your short option. Giovanni Bernard is also your swing option. You have you have a check down point to him. You always have him kind of doing a hit and roll, where he throws a light block and then rolls off, just to kind of give Andy Dalton a little more time, and then give him an option if he doesn't have any options down the field. So he plays multiple roles in this offense, and so for Jeremy Hill, I think he is, if he can get back to the ground game that he had his rookie year, I think he has the potential of not only being better than Giovanni Bernard, even in a PPR league, but I also think he might even be able to bump himself to a low running back 1, again, depending on what your league sets in terms of the scoring. Some leagues have your wide receiver at 20 yards per point and your running backs at 10. Some have 5 and 10. So it all really depends on how the point structure sets up for your league, of course. But Jeremy Hill has to prove himself, which is why I kind of give him a lower grade than what obviously Yahoo did with number 48. But I'm almost looking at him as kind of a mid-round or a mid-draft round. Again, depending on how many players you have, you're probably looking at a 6th-round pick, for me at least at that point, unless you really have somebody who doesn't show up and is auto-picking. And if he's auto-picking, he's probably going to go in the 3rd, 4th round.
Yeah, I think Bernil. Wow. Hey, man, that's a pretty sweet name. We should call him that.
You know what? That's we had Thunder and Lightning. Now we have
Bernil. I would put Hill in that about round 4 to 6 range, just because he's going to get touches. But yeah, I'm with you. In a PPR league, definitely target Bernard more. I'm not against the idea of handcuff here by any stretch, just because we know that they're pretty close in carries. So that plays a part there. But there are some guys rated above Hill that I really don't agree with in this circumstance. Not that they're bad players by that stretch by any way, but just other concerns. Like C.J. Anderson was a guy who,
thank you,
got some issues last year. Matt Forte was hurt last year.
Yep.
Carlos Hyde did not do too much last year, when he got his chance to play. Jonathan Stewart, I fully get. I mean, he had a hell of a year in Carolina, even splitting carries with Cam. That's weird to say about a quarterback, isn't it? And then Thomas Rawls is getting a lot of love, and I get that. Don't get me wrong, because Seattle's got a great offensive line, and anytime you have Russell Wilson in your team, you're gonna make some things happen. But Thomas Rawls has some interesting handcuffs there, man. One, he was hurt last year. I understand he did film from Marshawn Lynch. But two, Seattle just brought in C.J. Prosise from Notre Dame, who I can tell you very well is going to be a special player in this league, especially in a PPR format. He is a late-round steal, that being Prosise. So I don't really know if I'm ready to put Thomas Rawls in that top 10 range just because of the people in front of him. But going back to what I'm saying there is I don't understand how you can tell me Deion Lewis and C.J. Anderson or Carlos Hyde and Matt Forte are rated above Hill. Not that they're bad players, but they haven't shown what Hill's done as far as being in the end zone, or they've just had injury concerns.
Well, see, Jonathan Stewart for Yahoo is actually behind Jeremy Hill, which is kind of interesting to me. Now, for me, I think that's actually the right way to go, just because you do have Cam Newton. Cam Newton is a very option-oriented quarterback, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the yardage that Cam Newton picked up on the ground versus the yardage that Jonathan Stewart picked up on the ground was fairly close.
Very even. But Jonathan Stewart had touchdowns.
So, I'm not going Jonathan Stewart there. I think that's the right ranking Yahoo has up there, is putting him behind. Thomas Rawls is a very interesting one. As you said, Matt Forte was injured. Another one that I am very interested to see, because I think these distractions are going to hurt him, even though he actually today was kind of, I don't want to say he was, proven innocent, because he wasn't, but they kind of wrapped up the investigation and said, we're not really going to pursue anything on him. And that's LaShawn McCoy. Mm-hmm. And so, however, he's had a lot of distractions, at least in the off season. And so it's going to be interesting to see how he even bounces back. Yes, I know who his coach is. I mean, Rex Ryan is
round and pound extraordinaire.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we talk about how great his dad was, especially with that Bears team, but he almost runs his own circus. And if I'm not mistaken, isn't his defensive coordinator his brother?
I think he's a defensive assistant. He's not a coordinator.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's Ryan's three-ring circus up in Buffalo this year. So it's going to be interesting to see even how he performs. Carlos Hyde's an interesting one, just because, and you also know how much I did love Carlos Hyde. And I have huge respect for him. But no offense, you have a circus going on in San Francisco, and I don't think Carlos Hyde is going to have a great year.
No.
The other one that I'm kind of wondering about, and again, it's all going to depend on how his quarterback is, and that would be Devontae Freeman.
Yeah.
Great back. I'm not putting
really struggled the second half of the year last year, though.
That's exactly why I'm a little concerned. On Yahoo, he's ranked number 21, so they view him fairly high. But at the same time, I scratch my head a little, because he did struggle late last season, and he has a quarterback that, if he starts hooking up with his wide receivers, and of course we know who one of his wide receivers is now.
Julio!
So we have Sanu, in there, and so it really is going to be interesting to see how many carries he really gets this year, especially if everything's starting to click with Matt Ryan and his wide receivers. It's going to take some of the stuff off of the running game, which might take some of the responsibility, which means lesser carries, lesser opportunities, fewer touchdowns.
Real quick before we move to wide receiver situation there. Giovanni Bernard, like we've said, PPR weapon. was actually third last year on the team on the Bengals in receiving yards, had a 100-yard receiving game against a really good Arizona Cardinals defense. Granted, I know one of those was a long screen play, but
100 yards is 100 yards, doesn't matter.
Yeah, you get that. That's a bonus in some leagues. So.
Yep, exactly.
So Giovanni Bernard, PPR league, definitely a 5th rounder for me.
Yeah, and I might even sit there and say, if you are a PPR league, I might even jump up one more round there, and I might go 4th round on him.
I honestly think though, at the end of the year, that he'll end up being top 10 in points.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think he has that potential.
Yeah. So now to touch on wide receivers. And, there's no talking wide receivers in the fantasy football game without talking A.J. Green. A.J. is normally a 2nd rounder, especially now in this wave, the wide receivers becoming the big thing. I mean, you're seeing Antonio Brown and Julio Jones really being like a lot of mock drafts have them as the 1 and 2 picks.
You don't want to know who Yahoo has as number 1.
Oh, I already know. Oh, trust me, I already know.
I'm scared. I'm scared of what your reaction was when his name was called as number 10 on NFL Network's Top 100.
Let's ask Josh Norman if he's one of the top 10 players in the league. Yeah.
By the way, if you missed that conversation, go back to last week and listen to it, because that was probably the most entertaining part of that last week.
So, let's touch here real quick. So, A.J. Green right now, if you look on ESPN's top 110 wide receivers, he is rated 7th. I think that's fair. Top 10 guy, like I said, the way wide receivers are moving, that's not far down the list. But guys like Allen Robinson, DeAndre Hopkins, and Dez Bryant ahead of him kind of make me scratch my head. Again, this is not in any way, shape, or form talk about these guys' talents. I think the one interesting thing you have to think is about A.J. Green's stock is, 1, we don't know if Tyler Eifert's going to be ready week 1. So that's a big part there. 2, he has new wide receivers around him, so he's going to, I expect targets to go up again for A.J. this year, as much as I really like LaFell and Boyd. 3, he's A.J. freaking Green. 1,000 yards every year, 10 touchdowns every year. For the love of God, go back 2 years ago where he was hurt, missed 3 games, still had 70 catches, still had 1,100 yards, and still had 10 touchdowns. He has been in and out one of the best players in the league for years, since he's been in the league. He has consistently shown up and made things happen. He has strapped the Bengals on his back and won games for them before. He has been a wonderful player. So give my man some respect. Put some respect on his name and put him in that top 5 range. Because as much as I like Allen Robinson, no, he is not top 5 yet. I understand he has Blake Bortles, and I understand they throw 1,000,000 times a game, but no.
And you hit on it. Number 1, we don't know the status of Eifert, and we won't know the status of Eifert until we really get deep into training camp on how his status is really coming along. So number 2, with AJ Green, what we're looking at is, we also don't know, and forgive me if I missed this when you were talking, because I was looking at something on ESPN on Yahoo. Now I'm all jumbled up here. By the way, we just came back from basically a lovely technical difficulty, so I apologize, getting kind of screwed up here. But with A.J. Green, we don't know what Tyler Boyd's going to be, and we don't know what Brandon LaFell is going to be. Obviously, Andy Dalton has time to work with both of them. You have the Cody Core, James Wright whole thing. Who's going to be the wide receiver number 4? I'm not holding my breath for Brandon Tate, as most of you know. So, with that too uncertainty, on top of the fact of Eifert not being certain what's going to happen with him week 1, you're looking at A.J. Green being more of a primary target. And, of course, A.J. Green makes ridiculous catches, finds ways to get open, finds ways to make plays. And we saw the accuracy of Andy Dalton last year before he got injured. We're kind of hoping that consistency with the accuracy continues, especially with Ken Zampes, of course, being now the offensive coordinator, his personal coach coming out last season, of course, under Hugh Jackson. So it really comes down to he trusts his head coach, he trusts his number 1 wide receiver, His number one tight end has a potential of being back, but still, until we really get the status, we don't know if he's going to be back. Obviously Tyler Kroft and Tyler Boyd. We've got a lot of Tylers on this team. And Brandon LaFell are really going to be kind of question marks for this team. So that may bode well for A.J. Green and his stats.
So, which wide receiver would you fare more? I mean, are you targeting most? Or are you circling on your watch list? Are you going Boyd before LaFell or LaFell before Boyd?
So, for me, I mean, at least beginning of the season, I like the experience that Brandon LaFell has. He has kind of proven himself, especially in that Super Bowl year for New England. So, at least off the bat, kind of week one, I'm looking at Brandon LaFell as the number 2 personally.
I think that's fair, but I think I target Boyd, especially in a dynasty league. I think he's a guy you're gonna be able to hold on to for a few years and really get a lot out of.
Yeah.
And I do question LaFell's health, and I also question, not to say anything back, because I do like LaFell. I'm glad he's part of this team. I do worry about his hands, where we know, especially in a PPR league, we know that Boyd's sure-handed. We saw that at Pitt.
Yeah.
And we know he can run just about every route. But where LaFell obviously gains the advantage is his speed and getting downfield faster and things like that too. So I think if I had to pick one or the other, I go Boyd. But I really like, what each can bring to the table. As far as like being that late round guy, I think ESPN even has Boyd at 59 as LaFell all the way down at 91.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something, again, it's all going to depend on your style of league, for sure. If you are playing my league, again, playing Yahoo is not a keeper league, but it's also, is a league that is a PPR league. So, I'm looking at least in the beginning, I'm looking at Brandon LaFell as being somebody that Andy Dalton at least will lean on for the experience aspect. I love Tyler Boyd. I think Tyler Boyd by the end of the season is going to be the established number 2 wide receiver, and I honestly think he is probably long-term the better option there.
Yeah, I agree. So that moves us to tight end, and we've touched on it in discussion on each Dalton and Green. We know that you're not going to see Tyler Eifert as high as you normally expect him to be, not because of talent by any stretch of the matter, just because of the injury he's been dealing with moving forward. So if you follow ESPN, Tyler Eifert is number 7. Not a bad place because of injury. Obviously, we know healthy. He's probably in the top 4. Where I do have an issue is Colby Fleener being rated above him. No disrespect intended. I know you've got Drew Brees throwing you the ball now, but you've always been a 2 tight end guy in Colby Fleener, where Tyler Eifert, when he showed he was the man last year, did work in the red zone. Obviously, if you look at Tyler Eifert last year, he was very red zone dependent for his points, being the fact he had 13 touchdowns, did not crack 1,000 yards, but also missed 3 games. So definitely could have cracked 1,000 yards if played the whole season. Another guy ahead of him is Delaney Walker. Like, what? I mean, come on now, people. We're talking about Tyler Eifert here. He's done nothing but succeed when he's gotten time to be on the field in the NFL. Obviously, we know the injury bug has tackled him quite a bit in his NFL career. But when on the field, spectacular. Still one of my top tight ends I'm targeting. Not just because he's a Bengal, not just because he went to Notre Dame, but just because he's a special talent.
This is my issue with how these sites work, and you can tell me where he sits on ESPN. I can kind of tell you Eifert sits number 6 on Yahoo.
7.
For yours is 7. But the other thing I'm looking at, which is kind of odd to me because he played such a big role on his own team, is Gary Barnidge sits actually at number 9 on Yahoo.
He's 8.
Yeah, behind Zach Ertz and behind Kobe Fleener. Which actually Kobe Fleener on Yahoo is number 7. So they actually have him ranked number 84. Tyler Eifert, number 84 player overall out of all the players, and number 85 is Kobe Fleener. One thing that I kind of have a little bit of an issue with, and again, it's partially because I think that they're more of a run-heavy team here, and that is Travis Kelce sitting at number 5, above Tyler Eifert. I don't like that. I might even question, and my wife will probably kill me if she is still listening to me, as she might be still up here, is Delanie Walker being number 4 in Tennessee. I understand why he's number 6 because of those injuries, but putting Travis Kelce and Delanie Walker in front of Tyler Eifert, no offense, is almost kind of as funny as Odell Beckham being the number 2 wide receiver and the number 2 player overall on Yahoo Sports fantasy football rankings.
Yeah, I and that's what I mentioned there. I don't really agree with that. I understand, like I said, that we don't know what's going to happen with Eifert, but if he ends up being ready to play Week 1, his ranking jumps immediately above those guys. It has to.
Well, the funny thing is too, last year in my fantasy, I had like the double tight end team. I was set. I had Rob Gronkowski, and I had Tyler Eifert. So
Jesus,
I was stacked with a
touchdown nation right there.
Tight ends there, and it was nice because of course you had the flex position for your wide receiver, running back, tight end. So of course Rob Gronkowski was at my tight end. Tyler Eifert was at my flex position, and people were sitting there looking at me going, "Dude, why would you have 2 tight ends starting?" I said, "Dude, look at who the 2 tight ends are." So
yeah.
So needless to say, a lot of people were just sitting there going, "Yeah, I have a feeling I won't be able to do that because if I do get Rob Gronkowski, I'm pretty sure Tyler Eifert will go very quickly so they can make sure that I don't get that combination." But Tyler Eifert is one that I think right now, due to injuries, is getting really disrespected in the fantasy world. I honestly think that Tyler Eifert is a second round at worst tight end, or maybe a 3 depending on the league you're in. Again, I don't think he should fall past the 3rd round. If he does, you're stealing him. It's kind of one of those steal drafts. And it's weird to say that again when you look at him as a number 84 player on this list and the number 7 tight end for ESPN. It seems like Matt's out of his mind. He's saying that a tight end is a 3rd round draft pick. That's nuts. Well, no, it's not. Rob Gronkowski is a 1st round tight end, which whoever thought that we'd be talking about in fantasy football, drafting a tight end in the 1st round. It was always that cursed don't touch tight ends until at least you have your quarterback, wide receiver, and running back in place. And
I still stand by if you can't get one of the top 5, and I put Eifert in that top 5 weight circumstance. If you're stocking up on running backs and wide receivers in those first 4 rounds, I'm for waiting there. For sure there. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't keep Eifert out that list at all. So moving next here, man, we're talking about, where our Bengals players are listed as far as amongst their positions, where they're rated overall. You'd be shocked to know that the highest Bengals player listed on ESPN in their respective position is the defense special teams. ESPN's Matthew Berry listed the Cincinnati Bengals as the number 3, which I'm 100% agree with, defense going into the 2016 fantasy football season. The only above them, number 2 being the Carolina Panthers. That's totally fair. And number 1, of course, being the Legion of Boom, the Seattle Seahawks. So the Bengals is a number 3 defense. I love that ranking, even with the suspension of Vontaze Burfict. This is a team that, where they lost players, they got better. We've talked about quite a bit about Leon Hall, Emmanuel Murr, Reggie Nelson being the biggest loss in my opinion, honestly. There,
yeah,
we know what they bring in the front 4 with Michael Johnson, Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap, Doma Tepeko. The rotation guys, you're expected seeing a lot from this year. Especially in that defensive tackle spot, guys like Andrew Billings, Brandon Thompson. Marcus Hardison's probably going to get his chance to really make things happen this year. Linebacker core, without Vontez, you're still got a pretty good linebacker core. But when Vontez Perfect comes in, he makes them awesome. Obviously, a lot of big things to look forward to there as far as pressures on the quarterback, tackles for loss. If you're a league that scores that way, not giving up a lot of points. Being the biggest thing for defense in any league format. And then of course there's secondary, and this is a ball hawking secondary. You're starting next year. You're looking, although Dre Kirkpatrick did not have an interception last year, I'm expecting a healthy Dre to play pretty good this year. You're looking at Adam Jones being the second corner. I still expect Darqueze Dennard will be the nickel. And, we started to see how good he really can be before he got hurt last year. Mm-hmm. Obviously, with the safeties, we know what George Aloka is going to bring to the table as far as that hard-hitting safety, forcing fumbles, making plays, getting, blitzing the quarterback, but from the back, from the secondary. Has done a lot of good things there. And then, of course, if you're on defense, you're talking special teams as well. And this is a team that has Brandon Tate, who is just very frustrating in the kick game, as we've said, but also brings Adam Jones to the table. Has the potential to put Giovanni Bernard back there like they've discussed in the past. Now has Tyler Boyd, who's played a little return game at his time at Pitt. Yep. We know Mario Alford is a guy that a lot of people are penciled in to be a kick returner. So they bring a lot of interesting things there. Like I said, I'm 100% okay with that third ranking for their position spot. I don't have an issue with that at all.
So, I have a huge issue with Yahoo, and yes, for those who might be just kicking into this, which I don't know why you'd be starting in the middle, but I'm doing kind of based off of Yahoo because I play Yahoo. I don't play ESPN or NFL as much. You play more ESPN if I'm not mistaken, or at least
right.
ESPN has the Bengals sitting at number 14 in terms of defense, which, by the way, I'm going to tell you, or not ESPN, Yahoo, I'm sorry. And so I'm going to say this as nicely as I possibly can to Yahoo, and I really, really hope somebody from Yahoo listens to this. Please fire whoever does your rankings right now just for that alone. You're telling me that you are going to base your decision off of yards given up compared to points scored against. And that in itself is a joke. Cincinnati is much better than Minnesota, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Kansas City, New York Jets, Buffalo, New England, Houston, LA Rams, and the Arizona Panthers. Carolina's right above them. Arizona Cardinals. That would be an interesting jersey, a Red Panther. But they are better than every single one of those teams that you have them ranked above the Bengals. I'm sorry, but we're not playing yards here. No league plays how many yards did your defense give up compared to how many points was scored against your team. And that in itself is a joke. Not to mention, and I understand that Reggie Nelson is no longer there, which was a bulk of your interceptions, but you still have George Iloka, you still have Sean Williams, you still have Adam Jones, you have Dre Kirkpatrick. You're bringing in back, hopefully, a fully healthy Darqueze Dennard, and you have one of the best corners out of this year's draft who's right behind them just in case anything happens, in William Jackson III. And you're telling me that they're not going to get picks? No. And if you expect every single one of these teams to get pick sixes, you're absolutely nuts. They're not going to get pick sixes, just like the Cincinnati Bengals probably won't get a majority of the pick sixes. Although the defense is going to create turnovers well. Not to mention the fumbles, because most teams or most leagues allow for fumble recovery and forced fumbles to be points. So in that, you have Michael Johnson, you have Geno Atkins, you have Carlos Dunlap. Not to mention now you're going to have Andrew Billings and Domata Peko pretty much sharing that role there. So you're telling me those five guys aren't going to be forcing fumbles? You're a moron. Not to mention you have a ball hawk in Vontez Burfict who looks for the ball and take players out. You have great skill in Carlos Dansby, again, who is a huge ball hawk in trying to pull the ball out. So you're telling me they're going to be the number 14 defense in the NFL? No offense, how did you get that job to begin with? That's honestly my question with that. you can't put them as number 14. If you don't draft them as one of the top 5 defenses in this league, then you know nothing about fantasy football and you're just picking off of rankings, especially if you're on Yahoo.
Yeah, I'm with you there, man. So that's a little surprising to me. So instead of touching on kickers, let's kind of touch base, like as far as some of the different options there, different ideas as well. First off, rookies this year in fantasy football. No surprise there. I'm sure you agree with me. The guy we expect to score the most for rookies this year is probably Ezekiel Elliott from the Dallas Cowboys. Being behind that offensive line, like we said, if he has a healthy Romo and a healthy receiving core, Ezekiel Elliott would do big things in Dallas. So I think that, if Darren McFadden did what he did last year behind that Dallas offensive line, imagine what a better, more skilled player like Ezekiel Elliott would do. So do you disagree or you agree with me there that Ezekiel Elliott will lead all rookies in scoring?
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think Ezekiel Elliott's going to be probably the best, at least in fantasy terms, one of the best rookies out of this league. I have a feeling at the end of the year, he is the rookie of the year for the NFL. And looking kind of through where everything sits, Ezekiel Elliott is the only rookie on Yahoo in the top 50 players. And so, if that tells you anything about what the expectations placed on his shoulders are, it's incredible. I don't know how he's really going to react to it. Obviously, he's a rookie, but I can tell you one thing. Of course, being an Ohio State person, following Ohio State for a very long time, and that is that Ezekiel Elliott will be the hardest working NFL player on any team out of the gate, and that is just because he himself gets disappointed when he isn't a difference maker on the team week in and week out. And so you're talking about Ezekiel Elliott, and you're talking about one of the best and hardest working guys out of college football. He's got to be, as I said, he's got to be number one, the top rookie, at least in fantasy football. But I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the year if he is the rookie of the year.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. I would certainly agree with that. Any guys you think, from that rookie to second year, they're going to take their big jumps? Obviously, people talk about the quarterbacks in Mariota and Willson, who did pretty good things for fantasy football last year. I'll play a different route there. I think Duke Johnson for the Browns is really going to come into his own in that spot there. One, I think that he's better than Isaiah Crowell. Two, he's got Hugh Jackson calling the shots for him now. So we know that Hugh's going to really try to get him the ball because he knows he's a difference maker for sure. So I think he's a guy that's going to take a step there. Honestly, we both agree that Marcus Mariota, we're going to look back at him as, not just being better than Willson, but I think as far as fantasy football purposes go, he's a guy that can definitely light up 40 out of nowhere for you as well. So second year wideout, I really think they might make some jumps there. I guess I've already talked about him, is Devontae Parker. I think those are my 3 guys I expect to make that big jump from rookie to sophomore year.
One of the guys I think that has the potential, at least in the second year, to make a big difference, as you said, Marcus Mariota is probably one of the bigger ones there. But I'm looking at the other quarterback that was drafted number 1, and his sophomore year I think is going to be his best year in the NFL in his career, and that's going to be Jameis Winston. I think this league still isn't used to him. I think he has potential. Not to mention, I think he'll have some weapons in place that he can utilize, and especially having that second year to be able to kind of jump in with him. As I said, I think if you get Jameis Winston, this is going to be the year to have him. He is still a quarterback 2 for me, but I think he makes the biggest jump from year 1 to 2. But then I think he's going to drop way off because the league will finally adjust to him. I don't think he has the ability to change his game like what Cam Newton did to adjust for the league itself. So for me, I think sophomore year is probably the best time to have him as your quarterback 2, because after his sophomore year, I think there's going to be a huge difference in what we see in his production. Marcus Mariota is probably your biggest long-term if you're looking for kind of a quarterback in the future, or a quarterback two to make, who's going to make a jump in year 2 and then be consistent. I think Marcus Mariota is going to be the most consistent quarterback out of last year, year 1 to 2, and then going forward. Another one that I really want to get into is probably who you feel, not even year 1 to year 2, but who do you think is going to make the biggest step from last year into this year? And for me, I think it is going to be a Jordan Cameron. I think if he can stay healthy, if he can prove to be a difference maker on that line and get off the block and become a check down option, I think he has the potential. He has the hands, for sure, but I think he has the potential to make that jump and make a difference in Miami and be a target for, be a consistent target for Ryan Tannehill. And so I look for him, again, if you don't get kind of one of the top 5 guys, I think Jordan Cameron would be a great option, mid-round to go after. And I don't think he'll disappoint for you.
I have 2. They're both running backs, though. One is Tracandrick West for Kansas City, just because with the injuries Jamal Charles has had, he's going to be 30 this year. I don't think he's going to get as many touches just because I think Kansas City is a playoff team, and I think that they're going to try to keep him rested and keep him ready to go for when the time comes that they need to get ready for the playoffs. So I think West will kind of not necessarily split carries, but I think he'll get a lot more touches than he did before Charles got hurt last year. But I mean, Charles is definitely the feature back there, so I don't, there for sure. And the second one, man, I have not given up on Eddie Lacy. We see when Eddie Lacy's in shape that he is a very good NFL running back, and he's done a lot of really good things up there in Green Bay. He looks great. That P90X has done well for him. He looks like he's healthy, so that's a huge thing for him. I think Eddie Lacy's definitely going to have a bounce back year. I think he might have just over 1,000 yards just because of the way the Packers play their offense, because they're going to have Jordy back, and they're going to be healthy there. Randall Cobb will probably get a full season in again. They did just go get a really good tight end to add to the team, and what's his face? Holy moly, Jared Cook. Yeah, Jared Cook's in Green Bay now. So I think that we're looking at Eddie Lacy probably about 1,100 yards, and I'd say at least 10 touchdowns.
I like the Eddie Lacy pick. My only concern with Eddie Lacy is, number one, can he stay healthy? Because it seems like up in Green Bay they always have issues with health, no matter what the player is. So that's going to be one big question, because of course we do know that Jordy Nelson's coming back healthy, which means there has to be another key player that goes down for them.
Right.
So health is going to be kind of the key factor there. Another player that I'm kind of seeing that's just outside the top 50 is Jeremy Maclin. I think Jeremy Maclin got a good relationship with Alex Smith last year, of course, when we saw Jamal Charles go down. And he's somebody that I think he earned the trust in in that time frame of Alex Smith, who helped basically to make a run at Denver. And so Jeremy Maclin's one that I wouldn't be shocked. Again, he's probably going to be a mid-round guy. If he's there mid-round, he might be a great wide receiver 2, maybe even wide receiver 3 flex option, depending on how your league sets up. So I wouldn't be shocked to see Jeremy Maclin make a few surprises and maybe steal a few wins for some teams.
So with gains like that, there are busts. There are, when there's sleepers and there's busts. That is the fantasy football game. Who are you worried about in 2016? That a lot of people are talking about doing big things. Who is your chief concern going into 2016?
Well, number one, my chief concern is going to be Andrew Luck. Everybody's talking about how Andrew Luck's coming back from injury. Andrew Luck's going to do special things. I'm still a little worried with the talent that surrounds him. I think that that he's going to have some stuff that he'll definitely want to prove, but that also means that he may force some passes, cause some turnovers, trying to get back and prove that he is a great quarterback. So I see some mental errors. Not to say he's going to be terrible, but I think that he isn't going to be as high as what basically he's going to be drafted at. So I think he's going to be one of those that is an ultimate draft bust, just because I think he's probably going to be an average quarterback instead of that elite quarterback that a lot of people, especially out of college, thought he was going to be for Indianapolis, and even saw flashes year one and of. And so Andrew Luck is probably number one for me. Another thing that I think is going to be, and I think he's going to take a step back, and a lot of people may try to shoot me for this, but Cam Newton. I think Cam Newton, the league again is going to start to adjust to him and is going to cause a little bit of issue. You're going to see Atlanta take a step forward in that division. So I think you're going to see them. Of course, we talked about how Jameis Winston, or I talked about how Jameis Winston's going to probably have the best year of his career in year two, and that is, I truly feel that Tampa Bay is going to take a step forward as well. So that division is going to be a little more contested than it was last year. I don't think that Cam Newton does the same thing he does last year, and I don't think he's able to run as much. I think that more teams are going to keep spies on him, and they may adopt more of the Denver Broncos style of defense that we saw, that ultimately defeated Cam Newton. And so I really think that Cam Newton's probably going to take a couple steps back here. So he's going to be my number two. And I'll finish off number three without a quarterback. And I think that's going to be Jamal Charles. Jamal Charles is ranked number 19 overall on Yahoo Sports. As you mentioned his age, he's what, 30?
Yep.
And he's coming off of a major injury. And no offense, at 30, your body, and especially in a contact sport, your body doesn't bounce back as easily as it did. As I said, I think Alex Smith is going to be in a little bit more of a passing game than he was last year, especially at the beginning of the year. And I think Jamal Charles doesn't see as heavy of a workload as what we have seen in the past. So I think he is a very overrated player this year. I may dare say I may put him down towards a little bit closer to the 50 mark. To make him a better value at that point. And again, it's not to say that any of these guys are going to have absolutely terrible years and they're going to absolutely suck, but I think they are very overrated, and I think people are going to basically end up stretching for guys that won't do what you think they are and won't win games for you like they did last year.
Mine's kind of an obvious one, but I'm really concerned about Brandon Marshall this year. And that pains me to say because I love Brandon Marshall. Has constantly been one of the best receivers in this league, has constantly played at a high level. But, you know, I don't know what to think of him without Fitzpatrick. I think Todd Bowles, now knowing that he's probably got the game plan for Geno Smith until this Ryan Fitzpatrick deal gets together, if it comes together, is going to, play a factor there.
Yep.
That's a big drop in quarterback skill level for sure. And I think that Todd Bowles is going to lean on Matt Forte a little more just to keep Geno comfortable, or Christian Hackenberg, whoever it might be, or Bryce Petty, out of the three. So I'm very concerned right now about Brandon Marshall. And a guy we talked about earlier is Devontae Freeman, who you mentioned. The numbers look great from last year, but what we don't look at is he had a really bad stretch the second half of the season. Wasn't the guy that we saw as far as that first stretch of the year, did big things. So I'm really concerned about those two this year.
Yeah, and one I'm actually seeing on here that I should have mentioned is Yahoo Sports has Todd Gurley as the number 6 player in the draft. So if you're on Yahoo Sports, avoid Yahoo Sports pre-rankings.
Who are the 5 guys rated above Todd Gurley?
Well, I said number 6 in terms of overall player.
Right, yes. Who are 5 guys rated above Todd Gurley right now?
Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham Jr., David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, Julio Jones.
Wait. People think David Johnson's better than Todd Gurley?
Yeah.
No, that's wrong. That's 100% wrong. That's absolutely wrong. Look how bad the Rams are. Look how good Todd Gurley is on a really bad Rams team.
Well, here's another question for you then, with how you're saying this. Do you think Todd Gurley is an LA Ram by the end of the year?
Yeah. There's no way Todd Gurley's not going to stay in LA. He's going to be the face of that franchise. He's going to do big things there. He's going to put the Rams back, not this year, but down the stretch. He's going to help rebuild that franchise. I don't know. Like, I think David Johnson's good. You know, I think he's a late first-round guy, but no. Like, I think Todd Gurley's going to be the points leader in the fantasy football this year.
See, and that's where I think we differ a little bit. I don't think... I think one big issue I have with Todd Gurley is the line that is in front of him.
That he's still dominated with.
They let half of them go to move to LA. So, I mean, you got to have somebody blocking for you to be able to run. I absolutely agree. I think Todd Gurley's great. I think he's one of the best running backs in the league. My issue with Todd Gurley is not with Todd Gurley. It's with who's in front of him. And who's blocking for him? Who's creating holes for him? And that's a huge question because, in all honesty, half of the LA Rams team is gone. Half of the people that were in front of him are gone. They don't have a clue his running style. And so it comes down to not Todd Gurley. It comes down to who's blocking for him. And that's my issue. And so, I agree that Todd Gurley is a talent who basically... It actually probably should be talent-wise Antonio Brown, Todd Gurley. However, the team itself is what makes Todd Gurley, for me, less than perfect. If you get the proper line in front of him, if you give him the proper quarterback, if you give him the wide receiver help to pull some pressure off of the running game, I think Todd Gurley is probably the best running back in this league. However, it is the line that is in front of him. It is the team that is around him. And I love Jeff Fisher to death. I think he's one of the best coaches in the league, both morally and talent-wise. But this team, this management group above him, has not done him justice, has not gotten him the players that he needs. Because if he did, Todd Gurley would be a number 2 pick in this in any league that you're in, and Todd Gurley would basically be the talk of every single NFL network going into both training camp and the season, and we haven't heard really much of any of it in those programs. And so, again, it's not Todd Gurley, it's what's around him.
So I think with that being said, we can go ahead and close out this week's edition of Men in Stripes, our fantasy football edition. Be sure to be on the lookout for we do get into do our mock draft here in a few weeks. Now we've booked it officially on air, so we have to do it now. Thank you all again for checking it out. Be sure to keep listening to us as we continue to do big things next stretch. Everyone enjoy the rest of the week, and who day?
Who day?